Hello again. I'm here, Penney Douglas, at Afraid to Fail at Homeschooling. I am redoing day 2 because I accidentally deleted the video I did 5 hours ago, 4 hours ago, however long ago I did it. Probably 3. But I thought it was the flubbed up video from earlier today, and I deleted it and then looked for the good video, and there was no other video for today. So here I go again. Day 2, watch for readiness. So I talked about how we don't need to do school at home. We should make our homeschool look as much different from the classroom in a public school or in a private school or any kind of classroom type of environment. Has to be that way because they have so many students to keep track of and to try to teach at the same time. But we have more of a tutoring type of situation with homeschooling. We can individualize for every child. They would love to be able to do that in public school. I went to classes when I was still teaching that were talking about how to individualize for each student in a class, but it was kind of a pipe dream because it's so hard to do in a classroom situation with that many students at one time. So with homeschooling, you have one child, 2 children, 3 children. If you're like me and have 10, they still only come one at a time. And, I did have a set of twins, but only one. And that time they came 2 at a time. But other than that, you usually are just one-on-one with a child, and you can do that. Like throughout the day, you can just work with one child first thing, and you kind of go by when they are most aware, most alert. Hopefully they're always aware, except when they're asleep, but alert and ready to work, and their mind is working well, and they're, just really ready to receive information and really retain knowledge. There are different times of day, that each of us is. We got night owls, we got early birds, we got somewhere in between, and some have to have their coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't really get that, but we all have our routines and our rhythms and how our body functions best, how our brain works best. So you can find out each of those things about each of your children and concentrate on them at the times that are best for their learning time. And so that kind of goes into today's topic, watch for readiness. Readiness is when your child's faculties have all developed and matured to the place where they're ready to just absorb information. And Patty messaged me. Let me check this real quick. Okay. So the brain has to be ready. The fine motor skills, all the motor skills need to be developed to the place where they are ready to learn the skill or the knowledge or information, understanding that you're trying to get across to them. And they need to be at that stage, and at that stage of development, at that readiness level to be able to really learn. So you really need to study your child, study each child, and then when it's like, oh, they're 4 years old, they can dress themselves. You might just try things that you're like, I'm ready for them to be able to do this. So you try to teach them, and if they are getting it without frustration and without excess frustration, because learning a new thing is often frustrating for all of us. So of course there might be some, but if they're really not getting it, if they're really not ready and the things have not come together and gelled so that they're ready to know how to zip a zipper or button a button or any of those things, you'll know. If they're not ready, then don't be pushing or punishing or shaming because they can't do it, because when you do that, it gives them a bad association with learning something new. So you want to watch for readiness. And I'm going to look at my notes now. If you try to teach a skill or concept before a child is developmentally ready to understand or to cognitively process or has the skills to actually perform it, the child feels pressure to perform something that's impossible for him. This can lead to frustration, shame, anger, and a feeling that there's something wrong with him. It also produces frustration, anger, impatience, and unnecessary anxiety in the parent. You can start to think, maybe there's something wrong with my child, and there's not really. They're just not ready to learn that particular thing right then. But you know, we're always teaching our children, and so we get kind of used to seeing when they're ready for something. You know, we teach them to talk, we teach them to walk, and we don't even necessarily have to try to teach them a lot of things. Just talk around them and they learn how to talk and they learn how to speak your language. And a lot of learning is caught, not taught. So we have to be careful what we're teaching them and how we're acting, so because they are just constantly picking up what they see and hear from us. Okay, I'm looking and there's no comments, so I don't know if anybody is here on here with me right now. But so you want to make sure that what you're trying to teach them is at their level and they are ready for it, so that you don't have frustration for them or for you. We should observe our child in their play and their attempts to try something new. We should pay attention to the questions they ask. If they ask how many of something, you know they are ready to start learning to count. But don't rush them into learning to count to 10 all in the same sitting. Teach them how to count by playing. Let them count objects, especially objects that are brightly colored and have interesting shapes and textures. Those manipulatives I was talking about yesterday. And you can have them count the plates that you're going to set at the dinner table. You can have them count silverware. You can have them count things for real purposes. That's always good to let them know that they are helping and what they're doing matters. And it's important. They want to feel important. They want to feel like they're doing something big. Let them lead the learning time. When you're taking time to try to teach them something new, or you're just playing with them, but you think, oh, let me see if he knows his colors. You can let him lead, and should let him or her lead the learning time by their interest and excitement, and don't push beyond their attention span. Let them have fun and feel the accomplishment of learning something new. They can feel their brain expanding, and that's a good feeling. That makes them happy. They feel proud of themselves, and show them that you're proud of them. Now, there are some books that you can read that tell you what a kindergartner should know and what a first grader should know. And like I've said before, not all 5-year-olds are ready for kindergarten, and not all kindergartens should teach children how to read. When I taught first grade, I had to teach the kids in my class how to read. They didn't. Most of them did not come to me already knowing how to read, so I had to go back to teaching the alphabet. To a lot of them, we would sing the alphabet, and I loved to sing, so that was always fun for me, even if it is just the alphabet song. And just hearing those little voices sing along with me, I love that. So I would teach them the alphabet and the sounds that the letters make, and then help them blend the sounds together to make words. I took them from the very beginning when I taught first grade. And I know they're trying to teach all of that younger, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that's good for a lot of kids. I don't think there are many of them that are not ready yet to learn to read when they're 4 or 5 years old. I know some are, but none of mine were. And mine are smart kids, but they weren't ready to read early. I had one just kind of average age, like 6 years old, that she learned to read, but the rest of mine were 7 and 8. And my oldest, I have a story about him that I tell in one of the books I wrote, that he learned to read over a period of years of me trying to, I did a phonics book and a phonics program with him. He knew the sounds that the letters made. He knew some words. He knew a lot of words, but he still couldn't read fluently until he was about 10 years old. And then he just read everything, and he went to like 15th grade reading level, reading the King James version of the Bible and understanding it, and he has an amazing vocabulary. But he was late in learning to read, but it didn't make a difference in how smart he is or how much he was able to learn, and how intelligent he is now and what he's able to do. So you don't have to, if you read a book like that about what they should know in kindergarten, what they should know in first grade, you can read that, but don't use it as a step-by-step checklist. Like, oh, we've covered reading words that have short A. Now we're going to do words that have short E. And you can teach that way for sure, but don't use it as a gospel, as he has to have this done before he can move on to that, because in a lot of cases it's not that cumulative. I mean, they definitely have to know the letters of the sounds of the letters. Sight word teaching, I'm not big into that. I think that's just making things harder, unless they really don't get phonics, and some kids don't. So with that, you'd have to use sight words. But your child's brain might operate in a different sequence from what the person writing that kind of a book thinks it should, and so your child may not be at the stage of development where he recognizes that, like, for instance, that a numeral represents a certain number of objects. Like this 3 is 3 pens. They might not be able to understand that yet. Or he might not be ready to understand the very basic idea of one-to-one correspondence, so that he can recognize that only one number goes with each object that he counts. Like, you can try to teach them how to count by going, put my notes down here, 1, 2, 3, and then they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they just don't get that one-to-one correspondence at first. It takes some time. They have to develop the skills, the understanding. They have to come to a place of readiness to know one-to-one correspondence and understand it. There are some intricate, rudimentary concepts that young children have to learn before moving on to basic counting. Well, we don't usually think about the building blocks of understanding that have to be put in place before a child can grasp even the most simple concepts or ideas. Sometimes a child will need to do lots of pieces or parts of a new skill with lots of practice before they master it, no matter how simple or basic it may seem to us. It may stretch our patience and make us want to just go ahead and do it for them. But we need to let them go through the learning process until it becomes obvious that they are not ready for it yet, and they are getting frustrated and discouraged. then we should back off. We should congratulate them for their efforts and redirect them to something else to do that they're already skilled in. Give them a break from trying to learn the new thing. You might have to take off a week, a month from it, and then try it again later. And most of the time, it comes easy to them. And that's what we want. We want to make learning easy, as enjoyable and fun as possible, going according to their interests and what they like and what they are good at, what will probably might show what they will end up doing as a career or a lifetime hobby, or something, that they can just make some money at on the side. So we should definitely encourage those kinds of things, but we have to make sure that we're not pushing something that they don't even want to do or they're just not ready for. Now, I know some things have to be taught whether they want to learn them or not, and that's just how it is. But for the most part, we should try to find ways to make learning fun and keep it as interesting, exciting even, enjoyable, pleasant for them and for you. That's why I settled on reading aloud as my main form of homeschooling. I read really good books with a really good plot, good character development, moral lessons that are taught, but not too preachy. But just very interesting writing. The writing is wonderful in these, usually older books are what I use, classics, books that Sunlight curriculum recommends. Sunlight is spelled S-O-N, for Jesus is the Sun. They have a lot of really good books in their program, and I've read a lot of those books aloud, and my kids really get into them, and I do too. And learning is so much fun when we do it that way. So, a great way, okay, so if you're working with your young child and you're feeling yourself getting frustrated because they're not getting it, and you start to wonder, is there something wrong? Is there a learning disability? If they're really young, probably not. If they get a little older and they're still having a really hard time with something that you think they should have been able to get a long time ago, then you might want to go into the testing and stuff. But I am not a big proponent of testing for a lot of things. I try to figure things out myself, and I pray about a lot of things too, to get discernment and understanding. But if you feel yourself getting frustrated and thinking, why can't he understand this? Why is he not getting it? I mean, he knew it yesterday. What happened? Why doesn't he know it today? Keep in mind that when we try to do something new and something we've never tried before, it's hard for us too. We weren't born knowing how to do the things that we know now, the things that we're able to do, the skills that we have. Everything has had so much time to develop in us, it's hard to remember back to when we first learned. So a great way for us to develop an understanding of how difficult it can be for a child to learn a new skill is for us to try to write a sentence with the opposite hand from our dominant hand, or even just write a word or a letter with the hand we don't write with. Like if I try to write with my left hand, I can't even make it look like anything that I want it to look like. So if I do that, I realize, oh yeah, my child is having a hard time doing this because it's brand new to them, and it's not something that they've done a million times. They've never practiced it, and this is their practice, and we have to be patient with their practice time. So we should keep this in mind and not try to rush them or get impatient with them when it's difficult for them. We need to be as patient as we can possibly be with our kids. Not get impatient, not get frustrated. I know of a lot of homeschool moms who Well, the way they were trying to do it, I didn't agree with in the first place. Like, they would have a math worksheet for their kid to do, and they would just put it there in front of them, give them a pencil and say, do this, and have it done, you know, in half an hour or whatever, and then we're going to eat dinner. And so sometimes moms would do this. They would make the child stay at the table if they didn't have it finished in half an hour, and get very frustrated and irritated because they had only finished 2 of the problems in all that time. And then they sometimes would make them not even be allowed to eat dinner, and the child would just sit there. I think a lot of times, in a lot of cases, that they didn't know how to do it, and just didn't know how to say that to their mom. But I just don't think that that's right, and so I wouldn't do that. I would a math worksheet is not more important than your relationship with your child. Any kind of academic studies, anything that you do to try to get them to do something that you're asking them to do, we need to be as patient and kind with them as we would be with somebody else's kid. You know, we're not going to go yelling and threatening punishment with a kid that isn't our own kid. So why would we treat our own children that way? So patience. I'm a pretty normally patient person, but you know, I definitely have had my times, and I have 10 kids and I've been dealing with, you know, several at a time, and I've seen them through all of their growing and learning years, and you know, that has tested my patience. That has stretched it a lot, but you know, we have to be intentional. We have to think. I used to say a little mantra, gentle mommy, gentle mommy. I would remind myself. So if you have to do something like that, think of something that will help you to not get angry or frustrated or say things that you do not want to say to your children. That it'll stay in their mind forever, and you want good things to stay in their minds from what you said and did with them. We should shower our kids. We should keep this in mind and not try to rush them or get impatient with them when it's difficult for them. We should not assume that sloppy work, especially at first, means that they're not trying. We should shower them with praise and encouragement for their first efforts. Watch for signs of readiness and take advantage of teachable moments. I talked about teachable moments yesterday. Many children show that they are ready to learn to read when they point at a road sign while you're driving and they ask, "What does that say?" Use that opportunity to explain the sounds that the letters make and how to blend them together to make that word. Learning can be a very natural process. Teaching them to read in this way is very natural and much less painful than boring workbook pages and flashcards. It's much more fun and interesting when they learn from real life because it's something that they want to learn. There can be a time and a place for workbooks and flashcards, but look for chances to teach from real life. There are so many things we can teach from real life. All kinds of relationship things, character things, just cooking, cleaning, dressing themselves, finding things that match, just how to personal grooming, all of that. There are so many things to learn that, and balancing a checkbook, things like that aren't taught in schools that I'm aware of. Things that will be needed in real life. Life skills are so easily and well taught in homeschooling. We can know that, you know, they need to know how to do this. I didn't know how to do this when I graduated from high school, and so we can teach our kids those things. And don't worry about socialization. Homeschooled kids are, for the most part, very well socialized. They learn how to relate to older people, younger people, people the same age. They aren't stuck in a classroom with kids the same age as they are, just trying to compete with them, or trying to figure out how to make friends with them in the time that they have to talk to each other. They're not really socializing much of the time, except maybe at recess, but I don't think there's much recess anymore. So, homeschoolers get very well socialized for the most part. A lot of homeschool families go to church, meet people there. A lot of them live in neighborhoods. They meet the neighbor kids. They go out with their parents to the grocery store or to the library and meet people there. And so, and they have more time with grandparents if you choose to do that. So homeschool kids can be better socialized than kids who go to school. Okay, and the last thing in my notes is if we try to force them to learn something they're not ready for, we risk damaging their self-image or causing them to dislike learning. We want to instill a love and desire for learning. It's more important that they are ready and able to assimilate the new information than that we are able to check off a box on a checklist that says we covered a particular topic or lesson. If the child didn't really learn the information or skill, then we really didn't cover it at all. And I want to really emphasize that this whole thing with our homeschooling is about our children learning. It's not just to check off the boxes and get through a bunch of workbooks. If they're just doing it to get it done, they didn't learn. It didn't stick, and it doesn't become their own knowledge. They need to get to the place where they can take ownership of the knowledge or skill and really use it. Use it to make their lives better. Use it to help others. So use it to do what they were meant to do. And that's what we're really aiming for, is helping them to learn. We are facilitators of learning. We're not someone with all the knowledge that we're trying to impart and pour into our children's heads. We put the elements, we put the materials out for our children to get to, so they can experiment, they can practice, and they can find out what they really like and what they're good at and what they really want to do. And so I have written 2 books about homeschooling, and this one called 5 Steps to Becoming, the camera's right there, 5 Steps to Becoming a Great Homeschool Parent. My husband did the cover for me. See that cute little bear with the mask? These are all super homeschoolers, super homeschool dad, super homeschool girl with their capes. And you too can be a great homeschool parent if you follow these 5 steps in this book. Safe Haven Homeschooling. My name's Penney Marie Douglas. And you can get this on Amazon. This covers pretty much the same content that I'm teaching in this challenge. So it's a quick, easy read. It's 33 pages, and the people who have read it said it was very easy to read and full of information, helpful information. So you can get that on Amazon, and I've written this book too called The Basics of Learning. Learning. That's what's important. And homeschooling. And it's also on Amazon, Safe Haven Homeschooling. This is our logo here. It's a lighthouse and SHH. And I wrote this one. It has a little more in it. It's about double the size of my other book. It talks about learning styles and goes into more detail about how you can implement the things I'm talking about in this challenge. And so if you want to get more information, more helpful information for basics and how to get started homeschooling, those would be good. My son is about to come in, and I'm going to talk to him about his take. He was homeschooled all the way through, graduated from homeschooling, and he is on his way right now. Were you listening so you could hear when you were supposed to come?
Yes, I was listening for my cue.
Very good. This is my actor. This is Morgan. Scoot in a little bit more so we can see better. Okay, so I've been talking about readiness.
Mm-hmm.
Watching for readiness to be sure that the child is ready before you try to start getting them to
actually
really...
jumping into certain topics
Yes.
and subjects. Yeah. It's super important to make sure that the kid is ready first before you actually start teaching them a different topic, because if they're not ready, then they'll learn very slowly, and they'll have a very hard time properly processing and being able to really comprehend what they're learning. And it gives them all kinds of problems, because when you give them something to learn, they're expecting for it to not come easy, but to come naturally. You know, they're expecting, basically, when you give them a subject to study, they see it as your expectation of them, that you expect them to learn this material. When they have a hard time doing it because they're not ready for it yet, it gives them problems like low self-esteem. It gives them bad memories that they associate the topic or subject with. So then, once they are ready to be taught that subject, sometimes they'll still reject it, and they still won't want to do it because they remember the feeling of failure. They remember the feeling of doing badly at it, and then they either just associate themselves as being bad at it, or they just believe that it's a terrible subject that they don't want to learn, that they don't like. And so if you introduce somebody to the topic too early, then you can actually do a lot more damage than good. You always just have to make sure that they're ready for it first, because, you know, readiness is different depending on the person. You know, it could be at a certain age for one person or at a certain age for another. You don't really know until you've kind of tried, but that's another reason why you never try to force too much. Like, when it comes to education, you try not to really force things on them when you can tell they're not quite ready for it yet. Like, you know, there's always a measure of forcing something when it comes to education, because kids naturally don't like to do schoolwork and stuff. They prefer to go play. They prefer to go out and do things. But you have to, you know, you have to kind of gain the discernment and know what they just don't like doing and what they're not ready to do yet. Right. What they're just, like, you know, struggling with because they're not ready for it yet. So you can it's always just having to feel it out. Like, that's the difficult thing about, I always have a hard time with personality tests and stuff. I don't like those in general because they try to box up and categorize humanity, and humanity is as wildly different as anything else in the creation. Exactly. Each person is in themselves a universe with thousands of planets rotating and constantly gravitating towards it and around it, orbiting it. So to try to categorize any individual group of people into one box, I've always felt is really inaccurate, because they're always going to have to account for variables within these things. I think that chaos theory is actually, you know, as much as it seems kind of nihilistic to believe that nothing can be controlled, so why control anything? I feel that chaos theory is still accurate to the point that it accounts for the fact that there are an infinite number of variables that can occur. And that's definitely the nature of humanity, because God didn't make us to be one way or another. He didn't make us out of a mold to fit one way or another. He made us as each an individual and entirely different expression of himself. And so because God is infinite, it means that the way that people can be is infinite. So when it comes to, like, you know, just especially education, some people are going to be better at a certain topic, some people aren't going to be as good. But the important thing is to make sure that even if they're just naturally not as inclined to the topic, that you're not pushing them outside of when they're ready. Like, you know, you can kind of give them motivation, give them positive reinforcement to keep trying, but if they're not ready for it, you know, you can't push it upon them, otherwise they gain negative attributes from it. They start to feel, you know, a lack of confidence, they start to feel like they're just dumb, like they're just incapable. They start to feel like they're failures because they can't get this. Like, especially as a kid, when I had a subject I really struggled with, it made me feel dumb because it made me think that, you know, like, my teacher expects this, my book expects this, my everything, you know. Basically, as a kid, everything hung on me being able to solve this problem, me being able to do these books. And so it gave me no end of trouble until, basically I started to pick them up and I started to learn them, because over time I started to get more ready for them when I learned other material.
And that was your own internal pressure. I didn't put
Exactly.
the pressure on
That wasn't mother being at all like really forcing it down on me, or telling me bad things that would happen if I didn't learn it. No, that was literally just self-imposed pressure. That was a self-imposed expectation.
The multiplication of that feeling if you had someone.
If you actually had a teacher over you telling you, if you don't learn this, you're not going to get anywhere in life, or you're going to be bad at this, or all the other students, all your classmates are doing so well, I just don't understand why you struggle. When they say things like that, it really puts a blow on their self-esteem.
Yeah.
They lose a lot of confidence when their teachers say things like that.
So, how do you feel about learning?
I think learning is awesome. Learning is a form of self-improvement. Learning is extremely helpful for reasons including when you learn things that are directly applicable. Like, for example, just even simple things like watching survival shows. You never really know if you go out camping one day or something, or even just if you go out on a road trip and your car breaks down out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, anything you learn could be potentially helpful, as long as you're learning things that are applicable, things that you may or may not end up using. All information is generally good.
Okay, so how would you say that how do you learn best? What are your best modes of learning?
My best modes of learning. Well, personally, as much as I hate to admit it, I think I'm a more visual learner. I think that if I can't read the words myself, if I'm just listening to it, often I will zone out and I'll lose it. I won't be paying attention anymore if I'm just hearing it for an extended period of time. So I think that honestly, just I have to be the one to read it myself. I have to be the one to watch it myself. I can, of course, listen to, audiobooks and stuff while I'm, doing something, engaging in something like doing dishes, cleaning, whatever. But for the most part, in order to directly engage in something and actually be learning straight from it and remembering it and comprehending it, I usually need to be, actually having it in front of me. Especially because I have, a kind of a short attention span.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I need to keep my hands busy with whatever it is. Either my hands or my mind need to be really, really engaged into it. Otherwise, I'll start to zone out and I'll stop paying attention, because that's just kind of the way I am. And I'm sure a lot of younger people can relate to that. A lot of younger people, especially these days with all the stuff we've got going on, social media and things like that, people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And as a result,
that's a sad thing.
Yeah, that is a sad thing, because on the other hand, focus is very, very important. So you should, of course, always work on trying to increase your attention span, trying to gain focus, because especially the thing about a short attention span is attention is like patience. And if it's something you don't want to listen to or something you're not the least bit interested in, then it does require patience. But primarily when you're learning, it's best to try to find things or find ways to enjoy things that normally you wouldn't be interested in. Try to find something that you like about a certain topic that hasn't been good for you, that hasn't been interesting for you. Try to find something that you would be interested in learning within that topic. A good thing is to just have random I wonder questions. Because some days, I'll wake up in the morning, go through my morning routine, whatever, look at my news feed or whatever, and then I'll think, just a random question, I wonder how this works, or I wonder what would happen if this happened. And from those I wonder questions, you can do your research. You can literally just do your research. I wondered, I was I wonder how a refrigerator works. So I just looked it up online, and there was the Wikipedia page for me, and it told me all about a heat pump and how it uses Freon, all that. And
so I'd say you're quite a voracious learner. You read and learn, and he doesn't watch movies. He wants to be an actor, but he doesn't watch movies because they don't keep his attention. So it has to be something he's really interested in for him to really immerse himself into a subject. So I had to find that out about him. I didn't know that. And I was reading books that were kind of not fantasy, but historical fiction. And he would be like, well, is that somebody that really lived? Or, okay, that guy really lived, but what about that person that is his best friend? Did he really live? I don't know. The author just put him in. Oh, well, I don't want to hear that
Yeah,
story.
I was like, this is all bogus stories about real people. I don't want to hear this. This is like a fan fiction. Like, no thanks.
So I had to get different books after that were the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah, we
just
had,
the facts.
We had a couple scuffles, but Mother actually, instead of just, being like, this kid has problems, I don't see what his issue is. Instead, she was like, she actually understood, okay, this isn't working. This schooling, like, these books that I'm using to teach him aren't working. He doesn't like them. And instead of taking it as, he will like these books or he will die trying. Instead, she decided to change methods. She decided to go for different books, find different books
And
that
was
I
it
would actually enjoy.
King Alfred?
It was a book about King Alfred the Great called The White Horse King. And it was, it was a
biographical.
It was a very straightforward book.
Yeah.
Like, it had no embellishments. It had, like, almost no pictures in it, no illustrations, all, like, actual photographs when it did have pictures. And just, it was very straightforward. And I enjoyed that book a lot. I literally couldn't put it down for, like, 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
And then I even reread over a couple parts afterward after I first finished it.
And did more study about...
Yeah, and then I did more study, and I read even more books about it. And... honestly, now I'm very, very well versed in medieval English history. So, I mean, that worked out great.
Yeah.
Like, all it took really was Mother listening to, sure, we kind of argued, but she took it more like a discussion because she listened to my points and she understood that I didn't like the kinds of books that she was reading. And so instead of taking offense to that, and being like, well, I love these books, the other kids all like these books, so he's got a problem. No, instead she just decided, okay, like, obviously those aren't his tastes. That's not the way that he, wants to learn. So instead she just decided to find something else, even though it wasn't the best learning method for her, even though that wasn't what kept her interest, she was able to realize that, we're two different people. Even if we're blood, we're two different people. So she understood that everybody has kind of a different method of learning. And for me, it was historical fiction wasn't working at all. So that's the main thing. The main advantage of homeschooling, in my opinion, is plasticity. Being able to change your approach, being able to look at things differently, and being able to use different methods as needed.
Yeah.
Whereas a one-size-fits-all school will just constantly try to force somebody to learn the same way over and over until they're just able to regurgitate something on a paper one day, just cram for a test, get it all out on the paper in one night, and then forget everything the next day.
And only a small percentage can really excel that way.
Exactly. Very small percentage. And what happens, we get a lot of people that not only didn't enjoy school, but didn't learn a lot of anything from school.
And they feel dumb.
Yeah, and then they feel dumb because, they got all these bad scores and stuff, not because they were actually dumb, not because they were bad at the subjects, but because the subjects were being taught in a one-size-fits-all way that didn't fit them.
Right.
It's like trying to put everybody in the same size of shirt. If you tried to put everybody in a small shirt, it wouldn't fit. We're talking like, head
Lots
would
of
be
people.
stuck in the collar. Like, you can't do that. Just like that, like, it seems so simple to do that with clothes. Okay, yeah, you can't put a small shirt on a big guy. Yeah, but that applies to learning too, because there's so many different methods and so many different ways to learn. And that's the main advantage of homeschooling, is because homeschooling is based on the student rather than the classroom. It means that when one kid is falling behind or his grades aren't doing well, instead of just saying, oh, well, I guess he's just dumb at this topic, we'll just keep on rolling regardless. No, instead you actually examine what he's learning from. You look at the books and stuff. You get his input, and you find out, like, you do your research and try to find something that he likes. You give him another book and say, what do you think of this? You give him a little while with it, give him some time to study it, and if he says he still doesn't understand, that in tutoring. I mean, it's a lot easier to tutor when you're homeschooling because you are literally responsible for the individual person. So you can actually just walk up and, try to explain things to them in a way that they will understand.
Yeah.
So
and be available.
Yeah, and be available. Because, like, one teacher, between 20 kids, she isn't going to have time to sit down with one that's having problems with a certain subject. Like, she can't, because there's too many kids. Like, she has to get, just to get through by the end of the school year. And there's so much about deadlines in public schools that are just bad. Because when you introduce that many deadlines, when you give everybody, teachers and students, this many deadlines, this many requirements to fulfill, then it gives them stress in their early life. And what that stress does is it creates more cortisol in their brain. It causes more strain, where normally they're just like, okay, I just got to learn this material. Instead, they're like, okay, I got to learn all this material by this date. And then what happens? Learning becomes a stressful thing for them.
Yeah.
And then naturally, because
and they don't learn as well.
They don't learn as well.
It doesn't go as deep.
Yeah, because stress causes difficulty in learning. Stress
Yeah.
is actually a big problem with attention spans in general, actually. It's because they're under so much stress, they feel like...
They probably don't remember it after they regurgitate it on
Exactly,
the test.
exactly.
They don't
That's
remember
what
it
they do.
later.
Cramming for exams, you really think they remember it after they cram for exams? No. They usually forget what was on the paper after they wrote it out, because when they crammed, they just got it all put in their short-term memory.
Yep, short term, just
And then
stayed in there long
immediately
enough.
wrote it all down as quickly as they could. And as soon as it was all on paper,
Yep.
their short term was like, okay, we don't need this information anymore. And it just threw it
didn't
out.
have a chance to go down deeper. Okay, that reminds me, do you think that, like, telling back, retelling, narrating is a really good learning method?
Retelling
Or teaching someone else, or telling someone else what you learned, does that make it go in deeper and put it in your long-term memory? Have you noticed that?
Not particularly, not that I can understand.
Oh, okay. Well, that's like Charlotte Mason, one of the things that she says to do is have the child narrate what they just read, so that it does help you. Like, what you've been doing right now is pretty much what I'm talking about.
Like reviewing
Yeah.
in your own words.
Yeah, in your own words. That's the big thing.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like, oh, now I really know this, now that I've actually explained it to somebody else?
Yeah, usually. I mean, unless you already, unless you're not confident with it yet, you still don't feel like you know very much, because then you don't have a lot to tell, and then it actually makes you feel bad about how little you know on the subject, when you're like, actually, I don't know anything about this. But, I mean, especially if you're passionate about a subject, if you really like it, or if you think you've got rather comprehensible information about it, then definitely telling it in your own words, kind of teaching on a subject yourself, can actually really, help get that in. But then that's also another learning method thing, because some people aren't very good at verbalizing what they know, and other people aren't very good at teaching what they know. So, I'm kind of a natural born teacher of sorts. I teach anything and everything. Like, at my workplace, I would teach people not just how to do things at work, but I would also teach them, because I had a lot of, high schoolers and college students and stuff. They're, 18 people, 18 and 16 even. I would teach them just, school topics and stuff. I remember I was teaching one of my coworkers, as we were taking out the trash in the back, we were talking, and I was teaching him about English history, because I'm so well versed on it. I was able to just teach him everything he needed to know for his test or whatever. He would ask me questions that were on his test, and I'm like, well, this is how it went, and I would tell him, tell him how it was in those days. And, for me, that's really good, because, like I said, I'm a natural-born teacher. I teach just about anything I learn I can teach, which I think is a great talent, and I think it's been very well cultivated by my mother. So that's great. Some people, especially kids, might find it easier just to write what they learn, because then they get to think about what they what they're trying to say, and instead of having to conjugate it in their mind, because I'm also kind of a linguist, so it's easier for me to conjugate things, especially in my native tongue. So it might be easier for them to write it down. Other times it might be easier if you break it down for them. Like if they just don't know where to start, you could, give them a question or something. Primarily, it's that you have to remember that when you're trying to get them to tell you what they know, to review things that they do know on the subject, you're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to prove what they do know or what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to help them review and cement what they already know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the more natural a learning process is, the better.
The better.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely the better.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you want them to review and they don't know where to start and you ask them a question and they say they don't know, well, you can continue with the review, but write that down as, oh, we don't know this yet, and then just look it up and find the answer. Sometimes it's very, very simple because you can literally just Google it and be like, okay, and then you Google the question, and then, okay, now you both know.
Now you know the answer.
Exactly. Even that's
it's all about learning. It's not
Yeah.
about, oh, you get an A or you get a C or whatever. It's not about those grades.
Yeah, it's not about
learning.
grades. It's not about trying to attach a value to somebody's intelligence in one area or another. It's not about that at all.
Right.
A question that a lot of parents have about homeschooling, they say, like, I'm not a qualified teacher at anything. I'm not like, I'm not super smart. I don't know like a lot of math and a lot of history and a lot of this and a lot of that. We have the internet, my brother. You don't need to know all that stuff yourself.
You're going to end up knowing it and being very smart after you homeschool your kids.
You will learn it teaching it, basically. A lot of times you will be able to, as long as you know you have a good source, as long as you know like it's a good article or whatever, you can just read an article. And you can even just read it to your kids if they're interested. And suddenly you both learned, and now you're one step closer to being an expert at whatever the subject is, just because you read an article.
Right. That's really good.
Like, being in the information age, any kind of material you need, you can get now.
And we learn right alongside our kids.
Even if you have to buy, even if you have to buy a workbook or whatever, like, it's there. It's available for you. Most things you can literally just look up and Google it, and it's there. You have your answer. So, like, you can ask, like, what is in, let's say, for example, like, what compounds are in, like, I just looked up C4 explosives this morning. Like, I'm not interested in buying and blowing stuff up, no, but I was just curious because I'm like, C4 is a very fascinating substance, and I watched the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, and in it they used C4, so that's what made me think about it, and I was like, what do they put in C4? And so I looked it up, and there was on the Wikipedia, and of course, because I saw a bunch of chemical component names I didn't understand, I was like, I'll just watch this later, and so I just figured, I'll be back for that later, but you get the idea. It's anywhere and everywhere, and sometimes
curiosity will drive a lot of learning.
Sometimes it'll even end up putting you through a rabbit hole. And then you go through the rabbit hole, and you get smarter and smarter and smarter. Because when you wanted to learn one thing, first you need to understand this other thing. So you try to understand this other thing, and there's another thing linked to that. Yeah. So you will basically go into the very base, the very, like, elementary principles of whatever it is, and then learn that, and then go backtrack and learn that second part, and then backtrack and learn the third, and move on until you actually know what you wanted to know originally, and a bag of chips. A whole lot more.
Well, tell them about the 20 questions game that we played. We
played 20 questions. It had some of the most vague statements and some of the most unusual topics. I mean, it talked about people.
From history.
I didn't even know half their names or whatever. But she killed it. She killed it out there. We were all like, okay, let's not play this game anymore.
It's from homeschooling.
Because, I mean, dude.
Yeah, I didn't even know I was that smart until I played that game.
That was an adventure. That was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Morgan. That was very good. Thank you. I got to show my book that I have my book recommendations I do each time. This one is Love You Forever. And it is written by Robert Munch. And this picture is I got this book out of the library. I read it to my kids growing up, and they all loved this book. And this woman has this little boy, and he is just always making messes and getting into everything, and you know how we have to deal with that. We have to clean up the messes, and we try to stay patient with them. And she sings this song to her baby when he's a baby. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. And then he's growing up, and he's, you know, finally asleep. They're so cute when they're asleep, right? And she goes into his room and sings, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. He keeps growing up, which they tend to do, and he does some things that, you know, are kind of frustrating and irritating, but at night she'll go in there, even pick him up while he's asleep and sing that song to him. And then, you know, you get into the teenage years, and she's still, you know, he's still her baby. And she still sings that song to him. And then he moves out. So I've pretty much shown you the whole book now, but she gets older, of course, as he's getting older. That's a little far-fetched there, but now she's really old, and look what he does for her. And he sings that song to his mama. And I read this to my kids a lot when they were all younger, and it makes me cry when I get to that last page. And my oldest son is 30 years old now, and he said he saw that book somewhere. I'm not sure where he saw it, but it brought back good memories. You know, these reading aloud really bonds you together. You have this shared experience of enjoying a story, and then you have these lines from the story that you all can just like say a word, and everybody knows what you're talking about. And if it's funny, you all laugh together, or if it's like that, so heartwarming and heartbreaking, it makes you cry. He said it kind of made him cry as he saw that book again and remembered that story. So that's it for today. That's my second time doing this one. I hope I got everything in that I needed to. I thought my first one was really good, and then I accidentally deleted it. But I hope you get something from this. I hope this helps you if you're deciding whether to homeschool or not, or if you have already started, if you're running into some obstacles, or you're having a hard time with some things. I hope I can help you get past those things and see things maybe in a different way. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments or somewhere in the group, and or message me, and I would be glad to talk with you and help however I can. I've been homeschooling for 25 years, and I'm still homeschooling 4 of my kids. So I'm still in the trenches with all of you, and still learning, still learning right along with my kids and with all of us, as life is learning. We're all just learning all the time, and we want to get our kids to love learning. That is the big thing. I was so glad Morgan said that he loves learning, and he really does. He you know, he's always asking what if. He would ask me what a certain vocabulary word meant, or a certain science word, and many times I didn't know, or he wanted to know more about like flotation, or these 2 physics terms that he just wanted to know more about them. And so I went to the library and got books about those topics, and he read them, and then he was happy. So that's what we want. We want children who love to learn. We want them to be lifelong learners, and we want to give them a feast. We want to spread a feast for them so that they can learn in a way that it will stick, and in a way that is enjoyable. If it's enjoyable, it's more likely to stick. It's more likely to be something that they'll always remember. All right, I'm going to let you go. I've been on here almost an hour. I didn't mean to take that long. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Texas time.